All right, we are live, and today I'm with Elena Astilleros, and a big fan of Elena's work, and had a chance to have her speak at our conference and collaborate on a few things recently, and it's been a blast. So welcome this morning, Elena.
Thank you, Douglas. I'm a big fan of yours. I tell everyone about your book. I love magical meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about burnout. I know you've been doing some
Yeah.
research on the topic, and I think it's pretty germane to the work that we do as facilitators, especially hearing a little bit just now about some of your findings. It's like really
Yeah.
fascinating that I could see the connection between like facilitated leadership and just good facilitation techniques and mindsets and
Yeah.
approaches. So let's
Yeah.
dive in and unpack that a little bit for folks.
Yeah. And actually, I want to even go back on top of mindset and approaches. Burnout, what I've seen is, especially as a facilitator, you want to look out for burnout because burnout makes it so that instead of taking 30 seconds to say something, you're taking a minute and a half because people's brains aren't crisp. They're repeating themselves, they're not really connecting. So I've seen in my meetings where something could be contained in 30 minutes, the folks are just so burnt out, it flows over. And there's no
Mm.
way, like rabbit holes happen, and it's really floppy.
And is that a function of concentration or distraction, or what do you think the root of that is?
So I think the root of that, actually, I would need to do more research on this. However, our brain does need breaks.
Mm.
And I know when we've done day long sessions, or anybody who's done a day long session, and teams say, hey, we're going to push through our break time by, after a 90-minute, after passing a 90-minute break time, and it's like 2-3 hours in, then they're just spent. Those folks look completely hungover. They're still trying to push, but they don't know when to stop. So it's almost to the effect of a high performance hangover.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And how much of it is, is it like just decompressing and a context switch of just having to like
Right.
kind of like get back into or switch gears, if you will?
Right. Yeah. So we all switching gears, going from one meeting to another, begging apology to go run for 5 minutes, get your food, bring it back to your desk, eat it while you're in your next meeting, really disengaging from the meeting because you really can't engage, but you're not really taking a full break. You're looking at other work, you're looking at the Slack channels, you're sending out emails, you might even be on social, but there's no point where you just, everything's turned off and let your brain recover. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And so one thing that I found fascinating when we were chatting a little bit earlier was this idea that it wasn't com- necessarily all about overload, which is kind of the obvious conclusion that people come to, and that it
Yeah.
had more to do with other things.
Yeah. So there's 6 triggers to burnout, and Christine Maslach does a really good. She's the leading researcher on burnout, and so 6 triggers. Number one is work overload. But when I did research and I sent invites to dozens of high performers that I'd work with, when I did research doing one-on-ones with them, it wasn't the work overload. It was more things like they weren't getting thanked, and it was just so thankless. A high performing medical professional that I work with started telling me about how she had no control over which patient she could see because now that she was with an HMO, there was a quota to hit. So lack of
Mm.
control, taking that control away. Same thing with a lot of high performers where the business is pivoting like crazy, not telling them why they're pivoting, just telling them, throw away that work, we're going to do something else. And losing all their work. So a lot of lack of control is a big one.
Mm.
Lack of thanks, not getting the thank you. Those were the findings I'm finding inside of this
Hmm.
research. The other thing is, I was just telling you earlier, work overload. A lot of companies are saying, hey, we're going to give you a day off. Hey, we're going to take a week off. Yes, it's good to recover. Yes, it's good to take time off. In fact, if you're following a really strong regimen, you want to take regular time out and vacations. However, your highest performers do not need that necessarily, because they like work overload. They like getting to that edge, like, okay, I can't do anymore, because when they're idle, they go open brick and mortar businesses, or they go find something else to fill their time. So I think in terms of burnout, you want to look at what is happening on your teams. It's not just work overload. It's multiple things, and reward is one of them. It's not just money. It's thank yous and not getting thanked. That's why celebration is so important.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And, it makes me think as well on the overload piece. If we just take a week off, I was noticing HubSpot's doing like the global week of rest this week, and the entire company is off. What happens when everyone comes back to an inbox full of a week of emails? That's like, the rest is great, but certainly time away creates more, certainly more demand, and there's and if you haven't addressed some of the systemic stuff, like if people are feeling lack of control, no thanks, etc., they come back to this pile of work, and I can't imagine the half-life on that
Right?
rest is that effective.
Right. Exactly. Because then you start resenting your rest, because you're going to come back to more things, and you don't want that. So yeah, it's way bigger than just work overload. It's way bigger than even not having a vision. One particular story stood out to me, and it was the story of great leader. He's done amazing work in this Fortune 500 company. I mean, across the org. And he's starting to get, like, he leaves, and then he hears the the Slack comes through, and he doesn't answer. So then he comes back and he answers, and it's his boss, and his boss says, "Oh, taking a break, huh?" And it feels like micromanagement. So then he's sitting there saying, "Oh my God, I have to sit here. I just want to go in the bed under the covers, because this is too much to be watched this way. I was never watched this way." And he has this conversation with his boss, because that's the kind of leader he is. He says, that didn't feel great. That wasn't the experience that we want to create when you do that. And the boss said, "Oh, I was only doing that because I wanted you to know that I'm here and I'm not slacking off either." So it's this chicken and egg. People are trying to show that because they're at home, they're not working. And yet, because of the way it comes across, it feels like, I'm gonna make sure that you know that I'm looking at you. So there's a big difference. And I heard recently that when you are stressed out in a negative way, distressed, then any micromanagement comes across, any type of control like that comes across as micromanagement. But when you're in that inspirational space, when you're having eustress, it comes across as leadership. Like Michael Phelps got micromanaged. Every single Olympic athlete got micromanaged, but there was an inspirational piece to it. So that distinction is important to have.
Yeah, and I guess as leaders, it's really interesting too to be able to compartmentalize or to diagnose where someone is, and maybe adapt accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Because if we know what kind of where they are in any given moment, we might use different tools or might support them differently.
Yeah, agreed. I would even say, a lot of times we know where folks are. We know when they're on and their rhythm, right? And at least everybody that works around me, the moment I speak, they're like, "Oh, Elena, what's happening?" if I'm in a funky space, or if I'm alive and bright and moving in the flow, it shows up. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And I think even gauging that is important, and having the forum to ask that question to validate it is also important.
The other thing that comes to mind is your point around statements that get misunderstood, um, the intention was there, but the intention was kind of misinterpreted. And I think the only way that we can work through those things is to make sure that we're engaging in active listening, a facilitation skill, where we're constantly learning and staying curious about where the individual is. Because to your point, like most of the time we can intuit our way through and tell that like, oh, Elena's like not on her game today, or Elena's like on fire today. But what if I'm misreading it? What if there's subtle cues I'm not picking up on, and I just said something that made her feel like she wants to go get under the covers?
Right.
And you know, and if I'm not checking in and I'm not asking these curious questions, then that can compound and lead to like, to worse and worse and worse until they are at burnout, and time off's not going to fix it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And even if they don't realize they're at burnout, then they're burning everybody else out, because in your sessions, those burnt out people burn people out. They're very life sucking, unless again you bring something more, you bring more energy to rise above it.
Yeah, no doubt. So what in your research, what have you found? Were there any rules of thumbs for leaders, like as far as a cadence of things, or like interesting ways to think about gratitude and how to weave that in a way that becomes habitual or ritualistic, so that it's not forgotten, but also doesn't seem contrived? Are there any helpful tools?
Yeah, so there's actually several, and I think the biggest, well, this is from Christine Maslach's work. The biggest thing that she does, and I can share out more of the items for you later, but the biggest thing she does is that it's two-pronged. One is at the individual level, and one is at the organizational level. So you've got to support individuals to find their reward system that works for them, and then the organization also gets to find their reward system that works for them, and move beyond just pay. And a lot of that is surveying, right? Those questions from, I think Gallup has, I've been thanked for my work, or my work has been appreciated in the last month or since we last surveyed. And that's really important to hear and know.
Yeah, those 12 questions from Gallup are pretty spot on. I think that's what you're referencing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They've done a lot of research. Yeah. So I think because I work with I'm working more with individuals to make sure that they get their needs met and fill those gaps. The three things I've seen is ask for feedback from your boss. Say, hey, can you also let me know when I do a good job so I can do more of it? Ask for feedback from your colleagues, same thing. And sometimes ask for feedback from close people around you. Say, hey, I really need to be thanked right now. I'm not feeling that. I'm seen, I belong, I'm appreciated. Yes, Sarah Beth. That's exactly.
Yeah. There's also there's an awesome liberating structure called seen, heard, and respected. That's kind of along those same lines, Sarah Beth, and it gives you a little bit of structure to run the method, where people share stories about times when they weren't seen, heard, and respected. So we actually are kind of examining those moments where that didn't show up and how that made them feel. And it drives some deep empathy, because we're all like almost sympathizing, almost like with them, sharing them in that experience of like what it was like to not have that happen, or to and then it naturally percolates out into these discussions of like, well, how can we prevent that? How can we get more of the other?
Yes. And then again, tighter feedback loops, getting very clear on what success is, even at the beginning of any session. So that way at the end, as a facilitator, get very, very clear. This is success. So at the end, you say, this is what we wanted to do. This is what we accomplished. This is success. So.
And Elena, this is exactly why I think, the future of leadership is facilitation. And the more leaders can adopt facilitation skills, the better they'll be at inspiring, helping people navigate away from burnout. And you've given me even more evidence that this is true, just that there are these other drivers to burnout. So this is really incredible.
Great. So I'll get some bullet points for your group and your audience about
Awesome.
more to do for burnout and especially the gratitude.
Yeah, we can drop them in the comments on the LinkedIn thread. That'd be great for folks that are
perfect.
kind of checking it out later. Well, thanks for joining me today. I know we only had 15 minutes. It always goes by really fast. And it's always a pleasure, Elena. Such a beam of light and enthusiasm. So thanks for the energy and thanks for the awesome thoughts.
Thank you. What a great chat. Have a good one. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Bye.